Last night, Jimmy Kimmel Live erupted into chaos as White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt, aged 27, clashed with host Jimmy Kimmel in a fiery showdown. Leavitt called out Kimmel's mockery of Trump's marriage, igniting a heated battle of wits that left the audience stunned. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button for more explosive stories like this. The studio lights burned bright, casting sharp shadows across the sleek set of Jimmy Kimmel Live. The audience buzzed with anticipation, their murmurs filling the air as Jimmy Kimmel strode onto the stage, his signature grin plastered across his face. He waved, basking in the applause, but there was a glint in his eye, a hint of mischief that suggested he was ready to stir the pot. Tonight's guest was no ordinary figure. Karoline Leavitt, the youngest White House press secretary in history, was stepping into the lion's den. At 27, she carried the weight of representing a polarizing administration, and her reputation for sharp rhetoric preceded her. The crowd sensed the tension, their excitement tinged with unease. Kimmel settled into his chair, leaning back with a casual air that belied the storm brewing. "Welcome, Karoline Leavitt, everybody," Kimmel announced, his voice dripping with his usual blend of charm and sarcasm. The audience clapped, but Leavitt's entrance was anything but warm. She walked out in a crisp navy blazer, her blonde hair pulled back, her expression steely. She offered a tight smile, her eyes locked on Kimmel as she took her seat. The applause faded, and an electric silence settled over the room. Kimmel wasted no time. "So, Karoline, you're out there defending the former president every day. Must be exhausting, no? I mean, between the tweets and the, let's call them unique, family dynamics." The audience chuckled, catching his jab at Trump's marriage to Melania, a topic Kimmel had mercilessly mocked before, once calling it a hostage situation with better hair. Leavitt's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. "You know, Jimmy, I'm here to talk about policy, about the American people. But since you brought it up, let's talk about respect. Or, I guess, the lack of it." Her voice was calm, but there was a fire behind it, and the audience shifted in their seats. Kimmel raised an eyebrow, clearly caught off guard, but relishing the challenge. "Oh, respect? I respect a good joke, Karoline. Maybe you should try one sometime." The crowd laughed, but Leavitt leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "A joke's fine, Jimmy. But when you mock a marriage, a family, you're not just punching up. You're punching at people who don't get to sit on your stage and fight back." The room went quiet, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Kimmel's grin faltered for a split second, but he recovered quickly, leaning in with a mocking tone. "Come on, Karoline. It's comedy. You're in the big leagues now. If you can't handle a little ribbing, maybe the White House isn't the place for you." The audience tittered, but Leavitt wasn't backing down. "Comedy? That's what you call it? I call it cheap. You sit here, night after night, tearing down people you don't know, while I'm out there fighting for Americans who are tired of being laughed at by folks like you." Her voice rose, steady but laced with venom, and the crowd gasped, some clapping in support. Kimmel's eyes narrowed, his casual demeanor cracking. "Folks like me? You mean people who call it like they see it? Your boss has been in the public eye for decades, Karoline. He's not exactly a shrinking violet." Leavitt shot back. "And neither am I. You want to talk about calling it like you see it? Fine. I see a host who's so desperate for laughs, he's forgotten what it means to have a spine." The audience erupted, a mix of cheers and boos as Kimmel's face flushed. He leaned back, trying to regain control, but Leavitt was relentless. "You mock Trump, his family, his supporters, but you don't live in their world. You don't know their struggles, you just cash your checks and go home." The exchange was like a verbal fencing match, each jab sharper than the last. Kimmel tried to pivot, tossing out a line about Trump's latest rally, but Leavitt cut him off. "No, Jimmy, we're not moving on. You don't get to sling mud and then change the subject. You called Melania a hostage. You think that's clever? I think it's cowardly. The crowd was on edge, sensing the confrontation spiraling. Kimmel's smirk was gone, replaced by a tight-lipped scowl. He opened his mouth to retort, but Leavitt's voice rang out, clear and commanding, leaving him scrambling to keep up. The studio air crackled with tension, as Karoline Leavitt's words hung like a guillotine over Jimmy Kimmel. The audience, a volatile mix of gasps and murmurs, leaned forward, sensing blood in the water. Kimmel, his scowl deepening, gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles whitening. "Cowardly?" he shot back, his voice low but laced with venom. "That's a bold word from someone who spends her days spinning lies for a man who can't spell truth. You want to talk courage, Karoline? Let's talk about dodging accountability." The crowd roared, some cheering, others hissing, as the confrontation teetered on a knife's edge. Leavitt's eyes flashed, but her composure held like steel. She leaned forward, her voice steady, cutting through the noise. "Accountability? That's rich, Jimmy. You hide behind your monologue, throwing darts at people who can't respond. I'm here, right now, facing you. Where's your accountability for the families you mock?" The audience erupted again, split between those stunned by her audacity and those rallying behind her. Kimmel's jaw clenched, his usual charm buried under a growing tide of frustration. He forced a laugh, but it sounded hollow. "Families? You mean the Trumps? They're not exactly the Waltons, Karoline. You're defending a reality show dynasty, not some heartland mom and pop." The jab landed, but Leavitt was ready. "And you're not exactly Walter Cronkite, Jimmy. You're a comedian who's forgotten how to be funny without being cruel. You don't get to decide who deserves respect. The American people do." Her words were a whip, snapping through. The studio and a pocket of the audience clapped fiercely, their support emboldening her. Kimmel's face reddened, his cool unraveling. "The American people? You think they're all out there chanting your name? Half of them are laughing at your boss's tan lines, and the other half are too busy paying for his tax cuts." The crowd laughed, but it was uneasy, sensing Kimmel was losing ground. Leavitt didn't miss a beat. "You love your half, don't you? The half that claps like trained seals every time you dunk on someone you don't understand. But the other half, the ones you ignore, they're the ones I speak for. They're tired of being your punchline." Her voice rose, not in anger, but in conviction, and the room felt smaller, the air heavier. Kimmel leaned back, trying to reclaim his swagger. "Speak for them? You're a mouthpiece, Karoline. You read scripts written by men who think policy is a golf handicap." The audience chuckled, but Leavitt's smile was razor-sharp, dangerous. "And you're a puppet, Jimmy. You think you're free because you've got a studio? Your writers feed you lines and you parrot them. At least I believe in what I'm fighting for." The crowd gasped, the insult landing like a slap. Kimmel's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "You believe in it? You believe in a guy who'd throw you under the bus for a better headline? Come on, Karoline, you're smarter than that. Or are you just playing the loyal soldier?" The question was a trap, designed to make her falter, but Leavitt was unshaken. "Loyal? Yes. To the people who elected him. To the values you mock every night. You think you're above it all, but you're just a guy with a microphone who's forgotten what it's like to stand for something." The audience was a powder keg, some shouting in support, others booing, as the clash became a full-blown war. Kimmel tried to pivot again, his voice sharp. "Values? Let's talk about values. Your boss's values include gold toilets and dodging drafts. You want to lecture me on standing for something?" Leavitt cut in, her voice like a blade. "And your values, Jimmy? Tearing down a woman like Melania, who's done nothing to you, just because it gets a laugh? That's not standing. That's, sinking." The crowd roared, the noise deafening, as Kimmel's face twisted in fury. He opened his mouth, but Leavitt pressed on, her momentum unstoppable, her words slicing through his defenses like a storm tearing through a flimsy roof. Jimmy Kimmel Live studio was a cauldron of chaos, the audience's roars crashing like waves against the set's glossy facade. Karoline Leavitt stood unyielding, her voice a relentless force as she bore down on Jimmy Kimmel, whose fury was now a visible storm. His eyes blazed, his hands gripping the desk, as if anchoring himself against her onslaught. "Sinking?" he spat, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You think you're some kind of hero, Karoline? You're a prop for a man who'd sell you out for a retweet. Don't lecture me about sinking when you're drowning in his shadow." The crowd gasped, some cheering Kimmel's venom, others murmuring in shock at the raw hostility. Leavitt's gaze didn't waver, her expression a mix of defiance and cold precision. "Drowning? Jimmy, I'm swimming. I'm out here every day, fighting for people you'll never meet, while you sit in your ivory tower, lobbing insults at anyone who doesn't fit your script." Her words were measured but searing, each one landing like a dart. The audience was split, half erupting in applause, half jeering as the tension coiled tighter. Kimmel leaned forward, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Fighting for people? You mean fighting for tax breaks for billionaires and rallies for egomaniacs? Spare me the martyr act, Karoline. You're not Joan of Arc." The jab was meant to sting, but Leavitt's response was a lightning strike. "And you're not Robin Hood, Jimmy. You're a bully with a laugh track. You mock Melania, her marriage, her life, because it's easy. Because you know she won't. Walk out here and call you out. But I will." The crowd exploded, cheers and boos colliding in a deafening roar. Kimmel's face flushed, his composure crumbling under the weight of her words. "A bully?" he shot back, his voice rising. "You're defending a family that thrives on division, and I'm the bully? You're out here shilling for a guy who'd fire you if you wore the wrong shade of red." Leavitt's smile was icy, her voice steady as she parried. "Division? You're the one dividing, Jimmy. Every night, you draw a line between your audience and the people you mock. You think you're speaking truth to power? You're just shouting into an echo chamber." The audience was a live wire, some clapping furiously, others shouting over each other as the clash reached a fever pitch. Kimmel tried to regain control, his tone biting. "Echo chamber? That's cute. Coming from someone who works for a guy who thinks the press is the enemy. You're not here for truth, Karoline. You're here for loyalty points." The accusation hung heavy, but Leavitt was relentless. "Loyalty? I'm loyal to the Americans who feel ignored, the ones you dismiss as flyover nobodies. You don't know their lives, their struggles. You just know how to make them your punchline." Her voice cracked with passion, not weakness, and the room felt it, the air thick with the weight of her conviction. Kimmel's eyes narrowed, his patience fraying. "Oh, please, you're not their savior. You're a 27-year-old press secretary who's in way over her head. You think you're changing the world? You're just reading cue cards for a circus." The crowd gasped, the insult cutting deep, but Leavitt's response was a masterstroke. "And you're a 50-something host who's forgotten what it's like to have guts. You used to take risks, Jimmy. Now you just take cheap shots. I'm not afraid of your stage, or your audience, or you." The studio shook with noise, the audience feeding off the raw energy of the confrontation. Kimmel's face was a mask of rage, his voice a low growl. "Cheap shots? You want to talk cheap? Your whole career is built on pandering to a base that cheers for chaos. You're not a voice, Karoline. You're a megaphone." Leavitt leaned in, her voice a quiet blade. "And you're a coward who hides behind comedy to avoid saying anything real. You want chaos? Look in the mirror." The crowd was on its feet, the noise overwhelming, as Kimmel's control slipped further, his next move poised to tip the battle into uncharted territory. The Jimmy Kimmel Live studio was a furnace, the audience's roars a tidal wave crashing over the set. Karoline Leavitt's words, sharp and unyielding, had stripped Jimmy Kimmel bare, his polished facade shattered. His eyes burned with a mix of rage and desperation, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the desk. The crowd was a living beast, some chanting Leavitt's name, others hurling boos as the air pulsed with raw energy. Kimmel's voice, when it came, was a snarl, barely controlled. "Chaos? You're preaching to me about chaos when you work for a man who thrives on it? You're not some crusader, Karoline. You're a foot soldier in a circus, and you're too naive to see it." The audience gasped, the insult a desperate swing. But Leavitt's gaze was unflinching, her presence commanding the room. "Naive," she fired back, her voice low but electric, slicing through the din. "I see more than you ever will, Jimmy. I see the people you mock, the ones you write off because they don't fit your cozy little world. I'm not here for your applause. I'm here for them." The crowd erupted, a surge of cheers from her supporters drowning out the jeers. Kimmel's face twisted, his composure in tatters. "Them? You mean the people who cheer for division, for lies? You're not their voice, Karoline. You're their pawn." His words were venomous, but they lacked the sting of earlier, his confidence, eroded by Leavitt's relentless assault. She leaned forward, her voice rising with unshakable conviction. "A pawn? I'm the one standing here facing you while you hide behind your desk, your jokes, your audience. You're not exposing lies, Jimmy. You're creating them every time you reduce real people to caricatures for a cheap laugh." The studio shook, the audience on its feet, the noise a chaotic symphony of loyalty and outrage. Kimmel's eyes darted to the crowd, then back to Leavitt, his control slipping like sand through his fingers. "Real people?" he snapped. "You're defending a family that's made a fortune off spectacle, and you want to talk about real? Get off your high horse, Karoline. You're out of your depth." The jab was meant to wound, but Leavitt's response was a knockout blow. "Out of my depth? I'm swimming in your world, Jimmy, and I'm still standing. You're the one drowning, clinging to your tired routine because you're too scared to face the truth. Your comedy doesn't unite, it divides, and deep down, you know it." The crowd was a volcano, the cheers for Leavitt now overwhelming, her words igniting a fire that Kimmel couldn't extinguish. His face was a mask of fury, his voice shaking as he leaned forward. "You think you've won this? You think you can waltz in here, throw a tantrum, and walk away a hero? This is my show, Karoline, my rules." Leavitt's smile was defiant, her voice steady as steel. "Your show? Maybe. But your rules don't scare me. I came here to speak for the people you ignore, and I've done that. You can't silence the truth, Jimmy, no matter how loud you yell." The audience roared, the sound deafening, as Kimmel's patience snapped. "That's it," he shouted, slamming his hand on the desk. "You're done here. Get off my stage, and don't come back." The crowd gasped, stunned, as Leavitt rose, her head high, her expression unshaken. "Gladly," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "I don't need your stage to be heard." She turned and strode off, the audience erupting in a mix of cheers and boos, her exit a blaze of defiance. Kimmel sat back, his face flushed, his attempt to reclaim control feeble as the crowd's energy followed Leavitt out the door. The stage lights dimmed, but her presence lingered, a spark that had ignited a reckoning. Leavitt had walked into the lion's den and emerged not just unscathed but triumphant, her voice echoing beyond the studio, a beacon for those she'd vowed to represent.